So you've been digging into Bitcoin. Huh. Specifically, this whole idea of Bitcoin, like breaking free from the system. You're becoming truly decentralized. It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
Can this technology really outmaneuver the forces of centralization?
Right.
Let's unpack that together.
Yeah, it's a question that cuts to the heart of Bitcoin's potential, isn't it? We've seen it time and again. New technologies emerge, they promise to disrupt the status quo,
Right,
only to be absorbed by the very systems they sought to challenge.
right. Like how many times have we seen decentralization touted as the next big thing, only to find ourselves right back in the clutches of big corporations?
Mm.
So what makes Bitcoin different? Can it truly escape that fate?
Well, the article you shared dives into that very tension.
Yeah.
It argues that the biggest threat to Bitcoin's decentralization isn't technological. It's philosophical.
Okay.
It hinges on whether enough people genuinely understand and are committed to those principles.
Okay, that's intriguing. Because you can't just throw the word decentralization around and expect everyone to get on board, right?
Right.
What's at stake here? Why should we care if Bitcoin stays decentralized or not?
Think of it this way. When you centralize control over something as fundamental as money, it inherently creates concentrated power.
Uh-huh.
History has shown us, time and time again, those in power tend to act in their own self-interest,
Yeah.
often at the expense of everyone else.
Yeah, not exactly a groundbreaking observation about human nature, sadly. But this article argues that there's something even deeper at play here, something about the very nature of free markets themselves. It challenges a pretty fundamental assumption, this idea that inflation is just an inevitable part of life.
Exactly. We're so used to inflation, it's practically ingrained in our economic thinking.
Right.
But the article suggests that, true, free markets don't naturally tend towards inflation. They tend towards deflation.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
Yeah.
Deflation.
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be a bad thing? Like the economy shrinking.
Right.
Help me wrap my head around this.
I hear you. It seems counterintuitive because we've been conditioned to fear deflation.
Right.
But think about it this way. Deflation essentially means the purchasing power of your money increases over time. Things get cheaper because technology improves, efficiency increases, and your money goes further.
So instead of your dollar being worth less over time, it's like your dollar is slowly gaining superpowers.
Exactly.
I can see the appeal in that, especially for the average person just trying to make ends meet. But how does this tie back to Bitcoin and this whole centralization issue?
This is where it gets really fascinating. Bitcoin is designed to be deflationary.
Okay.
It has a limited supply, so it can't be endlessly inflated like fiat currencies, which governments can print at will.
Right.
And here's where it gets interesting in terms of centralized control. See, inflation benefits those in power because it allows them to borrow cheaply and inflate away their debts. It lets them fund massive spending programs without having to directly raise taxes.
Which, now that you mention it, feels a little bit like a sneaky hidden tax on everyone else.
Exactly, because who bears the brunt of that inflation? It's the everyday person.
Right.
The individual who has their savings slowly eroded, their purchasing power diminished.
Right.
So Booth argues a decentralized deflationary currency like Bitcoin could be a powerful counterforce to that.
So if we follow that thread, is Booth saying all inflation is inherently bad? Are there ever situations where a little inflation might be necessary?
That's a great question, and it gets to the nuance of Booth's argument. He acknowledges that some level of inflation can be a natural byproduct of a healthy, growing economy. The problem, he argues, arises when governments and central banks manipulate inflation to serve their own interests, rather than letting market forces dictate its course.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this whole deflationary aspect of Bitcoin ties into its potential to disrupt the existing power structures. But
Right.
let's zoom out a bit and talk about Bitcoin as, actual money.
Yeah.
The article also touches on this idea of Bitcoin as more than just like digital gold, right?
Right.
It's supposed to be something we can use in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. And this is where we move from theory to practice.
Okay.
The article highlights a crucial distinction between Bitcoin as a speculative investment and Bitcoin as a medium of exchange.
Right.
For Bitcoin to truly challenge the centralized financial system, it needs to become
Like a regular part of our lives. I should be able to grab coffee with it, pay my rent,
exactly.
maybe even get paid in Bitcoin.
Precisely. We need to see widespread adoption, integration into our daily transactions. The article uses Argentina as a case study,
Okay.
a country that's experienced significant economic turmoil, including hyperinflation.
Right.
You'd think it would be the perfect breeding ground for an alternative currency like Bitcoin.
Right. A real-world test case for this whole decentralization thing.
Exactly. But the reality is more complicated.
Okay.
While some Argentinians are using Bitcoin to protect their savings from inflation,
Sure.
it hasn't achieved widespread adoption as an everyday currency.
Okay.
Local businesses are hesitant, often preferring their local currency, even with its instability.
Interesting. So what's the takeaway there? Is it just a matter of time before people come around, or are there deeper barriers at play?
That's the million-dollar question, and the article suggests there are both practical and psychological hurdles to overcome. On a practical level, you need the infrastructure, user-friendly wallets, point-of-sale systems that can handle Bitcoin transactions.
So it needs to be easy and convenient, basically.
Yeah.
But you mentioned psychological hurdles, too.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, beyond the practicalities, there needs to be a shift in mindset.
Okay.
People need to believe in Bitcoin, not just as an investment,
Yeah.
but as a viable alternative to the current system. And that requires a level of trust, stability,
Right.
and frankly, educations that we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, Bitcoin can be intimidating.
Yeah.
It's complex, it's volatile, and there's a lot of jargon involved.
Yeah. Even trying to explain it to my friends makes my head spin sometimes. But circling back to this idea of centralization, that's where the real danger lies, right? If Bitcoin remains this niche thing that only the tech-savvy understand,
Right.
then it becomes that much easier for those in power to,
Control the narrative, to
Right.
dismiss it as a fad, a speculative bubble,
Right.
even a threat.
Right.
And that's why this conversation is so crucial.
Okay.
The more we understand the potential of Bitcoin, the challenges it faces, and the forces at play,
Uh-huh.
the better equipped we are to navigate this evolving landscape.
Knowledge is power, as they say. But this all begs the question, what would a world where Bitcoin truly succeeds actually look like?
Right.
I mean, can we even fathom a future where a decentralized currency is the norm?
It is a thought experiment, isn't it? But that's where things get really interesting, because we're not just talking about a new currency here. We're talking about a fundamental shift in power dynamics.
Okay.
Imagine a world where individuals have significantly more control over their finances,
Okay.
where governments and central banks have less power to manipulate currencies.
Where the very fabric of our financial system is decentralized.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Hmm.
This isn't just about Bitcoin, is it? It's about something much bigger.
Exactly. It's about the potential for a more equitable, more transparent, and ultimately more free financial system.
Right.
But whether that potential is realized, well, that's a story that's still being written,
Yeah.
and one that we all have a hand in shaping.
You're right. It's not a spectator sport, really.
Yeah.
We're all kind of part of writing this story,
Mm-hmm.
even if we, don't realize it. But, wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. From the potential of Bitcoin to, disrupt centralized power, to this whole idea of deflation as a natural force,
Mm-hmm.
even the challenges of making it an everyday currency. It's a lot to process.
It is a lot to unpack, and I think what's important to remember is this is all still unfolding.
Right.
The future of Bitcoin and its impact on the financial landscape is far from certain.
That's both exhilarating and a little intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about it being an evolving story is key. It's not like there's a predetermined outcome here, right?
Yeah.
It all depends on what we collectively do with this technology, with these ideas.
Precisely, and that's what I think makes this deep dive particularly relevant for you, the listener. You're clearly engaged with these ideas. You're asking the right questions.
Right.
Now, armed with a deeper understanding of the complexities and the potential, you're in a position to not just observe this evolution, but to actually participate in it.
I like the sound of that. So it's not just about whether Bitcoin succeeds or fails, in some abstract sense. It's about, what kind of future we want to create, right? It's about understanding the trade-offs, the risks, the potential rewards.
And maybe even more importantly, it's about challenging our assumptions.
Yeah.
We've been living in a world of centralized financial systems for so long, it's hard to imagine anything else. But what if there's a different way? What if true economic freedom requires rethinking some of the fundamental building blocks of our society?
Okay, now you're really pushing me out of my comfort zone. But that's what I love about these deep dives.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about accumulating information. It's about expanding our perspectives,
Yeah.
Asking those bigger what-if questions.
And maybe even feeling a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because that discomfort often signals that we're on to something important,
Yeah.
something that has the potential to reshape our understanding of the world.
So for someone listening who's been following the Bitcoin saga, who's maybe even invested in it,
Yeah,
what's the, one key takeaway they should walk away with?
that's a question only you can answer, but I'll leave you with this thought. If Bitcoin were to truly succeed as a decentralized currency, it wouldn't just challenge our financial systems, it would challenge our very understanding of power. It would force us to confront the ways in which centralized control has shaped our world and to imagine new possibilities for a more equitable and decentralized future.
Wow, that's a powerful thought to end on. It's a lot to process, but in the best way possible. I think that's what makes these deep dives so valuable. It's not just about getting the headlines right. It's about understanding the deeper currents shaping our world and then asking ourselves, what role do I want to play in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, on that note, I think we've done our brains a good workout for one day.
Oh.
A huge thank you to you, expert, for guiding us through this complex and fascinating landscape. And to you, listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brain muscles working.